Welcome back. Today I'm going to give you a crash course in Procreate for engraving. A lot of people just got iPads or just now trying it out for the first time or just want to know how to use it. This is going to be extremely beginner level. If you're already using Procreate, there's probably not going to be a lot here for you, but if you're just getting started, this is what you're looking for. Let's jump into it. First, let's look at the hardware. iPad. You need the iPad to use Procreate. Personal annoyance, got a camera bump on the back of the iPad. It boggles my mind that Apple, with all their beautiful design and intelligent engineers, continues to do this, so you can't set it flat. It won't set flat. You can remedy this by getting a case. I have a hard case that holds it, that has like a stand built into it, that holds the pencil, holds all that. Get a case. I prefer not to, but whatever. Okay, your pencil. This is your pencil. This is the iPad Pencil 2. It charges by just sticking to the side of the iPad. It's beautiful. It's magical. I absolutely love it. The iPad Pencil 1, I think you have to plug in manually to charge it, whatever. The rest of this stuff should all work, I think, with both versions, but I like number 2. Okay, let's hop into Procreate and get started. So, on your iPad here, one quick tip, something that's caught me many times with the Apple Pencil 2. You may one day come up to it and find that nothing is working, like this. And what that is the tip, or the nib, that's what this is called, of your Apple Pencil is loose. Just tighten that sucker down, and it will work again. That's happened to me many times. I don't know if it's my case or what, but either way, save you some trouble there. Just make sure your nib is tight and your iPad Pencil will work. I use a screen protector called Paper-like. It makes it feel more like paper. I like it, but really I don't think it makes much of a difference. So not quite a product endorsement. Okay, we open up Procreate, and this is the first thing you see. This is the gallery. This is all the work that you've done. You can flick through them. You can open previous works and look at them, etc. Okay? So in Procreate, once you have opened something, or you can go back to the gallery by clicking gallery and click the plus sign to start a new one. We'll come back to those settings in a few moments. So now you are into Procreate. This is the interface where you will be drawing. Okay? So just a quick rundown of the interface. Up here you have some various tools. Over here you have things like your paintbrush, your eraser, and your layers. On the side here you have the size of the paintbrush and the intensity or the opacity of the paintbrush. So if you put, that size down pretty far, oh, I'm on erase. If you put the size down pretty far, you make a small line. Oh, let's switch to a different brush so you can see a little bit better. Okay. Small line, fat line, all the way up on opacity. You can see it. Down lower, it's almost clear. You can't see it. You get the point, okay? So, size of your brush, opacity of your brush. Here's undo. We're going to undo. There's redo right below that. Okay? Here is the color of your stroke. You can continue to change that. And you can sample your color by hitting this and then move this around to choose the color you want. Now, for engraving, I typically work in black and white. That's just a personal preference. You, of course, can work however you want. Do your own thing. All right. Changing brushes. You click on the little brush. These are the default. I've not added any to it, so you can flip through these and find stuff you like. I typically work for sketching. I work here on Procreate Pencil for my sketches, and then I switch to inking, and I personally like syrup for my line work. For another thing you need to know is layers. In the layer menu here, you can add layers by hitting the plus sign. This continues to add layers. If you've never worked with software that has layers before, consider each layer to be like a pane of glass. You can see through it, you can draw on it, you can reorganize them in different order, and you can see through all of them. Now over here on the layers, you have a few things you can do to them. If you press and hold, you can drag layers around to move them in the stack. If you tap it, you have a few options over here, such as clearing the layer or inverting the layer or merging it or combining it with ones below it. And if you click this little in, you get other options like the opacity and some funky effects you can add to it, but we're not going to get into all that here. This little check mark here determines whether or not that layer is visible. For example, my drawings here are on layer 1. I can hide that, bring it back, hide it, bring it back. I can go to my background color and change the color of the background. Bring back layer 1. You get the point. So let's hop into, deleting layers. Move the layer to the left, swipe to the left to delete it or duplicate it. Pretty easy. So let's hop into the actual process for how I use this in hand engraving. There is a step-by-step process that is useful. We'll go back to our gallery here and we'll start over. I tend to work at a fairly high resolution so that I can print it at high resolution, transfer it at high resolution, and if I really want, I could get it printed on things like t-shirts, stickers, buttons, and stuff like that. Working at high resolution will help you have quality artwork you can use in other ways. What do I mean by high resolution? Well, you will figure out down the road what your absolute needs are, but for now, what I do is I have created, by clicking the little plus sign here, I created one that is 3,000 pixels by 3,000 pixels square at 300 dpi. And what that does is that gives me a high enough quality that I can use it for print later if I want. Now, when you're in the interface, you can use 2 fingers to move your canvas around like this and scale it and stuff like that. You will be using that quite a lot. Instead of, if you're used to paper where you would move your paper, you will be moving your canvas. So the first step that I do when I'm working on engraving is I start with a shape. Typically that shape is based off of a picture. I'll take an object, I'll take a photo of it as straight down as I can, typically with a ruler next to it because I use that on the last step. And then once I have that picture, I come here to this little wrench. In Procreate, I go to Add and I go to Insert a Photo. Let me see if I have one here. I have lots of photos here, nothing too personal, but what I have here is a Zippo with a ruler. And you can scale these photos around to meet your needs. I'm going to make it pretty big here. There we go. And now if we look at our layers, we have a background layer, we have an image layer. Now, I don't like to draw directly onto this because when I go to print it later, I want my lines on a nice clean layer with nothing else on it. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to create a new layer. So now we have 3 layers. I'm going to go to my brushes, to sketching, Procreate pencil. I'm going to turn it black. Some people work in red, some people work in black, doesn't matter. Just whatever you want to do. I'm going to turn the opacity all the way up, and I'm going to do a little test here. I want it a little bit fatter than that for this. What this layer is going to be is my sketch. This is where I brainstorm ideas. So I want it to be a little bit fatter because this is kind of rough. So I'm going to sketch out an idea here. Notice these 2 lines are kind of wavy. One quick tip here is if you want a straight line, drag and leave the tip of your pen down and you'll see, let's undo, that if you leave the tip of your pen down, it straightens up and you can actually place it wherever you want. So there we go, perfectly straight line. So we'll draw out straight line, you get the point. And then maybe, I don't know, I'll do a skull. I do really rough sketches when I'm getting started here, and then I refine them as I go. Okay, so we have what looks like a skull kind of coming into shape here. Maybe we'll do a scroll on the bottom of that, and maybe a little bit of that. And then you can take your sketches to be, as detailed as you want. You don't have to keep them as rough as this. You can take your sketch as far as you want, but this layer is just a sketch. Now remember, this is a separate layer than your Zippo, so you can hide that, you can bring it back. And what I then do is I create a new layer. Now this new layer is where the actual drawing begins. Once I'm happy with my sketch, my layout, usually more detailed than this, I will take the sketch and I will reduce the opacity. So now you can see it's just barely there. I will go to a new layer and I will switch by clicking the paintbrush here to syrup. Let me do a test stroke here. It's a little skinnier than I want for this, so I will undo. I'll fatten it up. There we go. Now that's maybe a bit much. Undo, kind of in the middle. Good. Undo. Now this is where the fine work begins. So I will begin doing my real lines here. Again, I'm not really spending a lot of time making this a fantastic drawing because this is just to show you how the interface works. Okay, so I've got my lines. After you have your lines, now I'll show you a more detailed example in a moment. After you have your lines, you create a new layer for your details. Now I do this for a few reasons. I like often to use the final drawing with all the details only as reference and actually transfer only the outlines onto my work for a few reasons. The main one being that my printer doesn't do the finest details that I can actually do with the hand engraver, so it just becomes mush in the visuals under the microscope if I actually try to transfer all the details into the metal. Instead, what I do is I transfer just the outlines and then I look at a fine version of the details as reference and just add them by hand, but you can do whatever you want. So now we have, again, going through these layers, we have the background, which we're not using, we have the image of the Zippo, we have the sketch, which we can hide now, we have our actual drawing, which is beautiful as you can see, and now we've added a new layer, which is going to be our details. So then on the detail layer, you might come in and do things, like your cross hatching, your fine line shading and stuff like that to get a feel for how your final product is going to look. Okay? Now, keeping these on separate layers means I can hide the details or bring them back. I can hide the drawing and have only the details. You get the point. Now, we finished our drawing. We love the way it looks. We are ready to engrave. What's the next step? The next step is to export your images. So, you want to hide everything that you don't want to export. For example, if I only wanted the drawing and not the details, I would hide everything but the drawing. Then you go to the little wrench, you go to share, and then share image. I often do JPEG, but it really doesn't matter. I bring them into Photoshop afterwards for sizing, and you can actually see the process I go through for sizing and printing in the video that I have linked. There'll be like a little card that pops up at the top of the screen. It will also be down in the description below. That will take you through the process of actually printing your images the right size to fit and transferring the image onto the metal using the acetone method. For now, all you need to know though is that if you hit, let's say, JPEG, it will export, it will give you options what to do. You can email it to yourself, which is what I often do, or you can just hit save image and it will save it to your camera roll. So let me take you back through another example, but before I do, there's one cool feature you should know about, if for nothing else, just because it's cool to watch. If we go here to the wrench, we go to video, and we go to time-lapse replay, we can actually watch our drawing come to life. There are a few options in this. You can scrub through it with your finger to see different areas at different speeds, and when you're in this time-lapse replay thing here, you can export full length or compress down to 30 seconds, and you can share that with friends. I love those. I think they're so cool. I love to watch them. I love to watch when other people do them. By default, this is turned on and recording in Procreate. So that's the process. That's the basic process. I'm going to take you through an example so that you can see exactly how this has worked on a previous piece of work of mine. Let's go back out to the gallery, and let's find one here. I think this has a typical workflow. This was a Zippo that I did a few months ago. Let's look at our layers here. In this case, I used a lot of layers. So some of these were reference. For example, this background image. This one here was a background image that I actually pulled off of the internet and modified so that I could make sure it was going to line up. This is a skull, I think, from a previous drawing or maybe off the internet that I brought in to use as reference and modified it. There are different layers here for different aspects of the drawing that I will hide and reveal so we can see. For example, this layer here was just some details. This is my background layer. This was shading under the jaw because I knew as I brought this into, I knew as I printed this and put it on the Zippo that was going to be just a lot and I could just wing that. I didn't need the reference there. Here's the skull itself. Here's the border. Now, one thing you can do, which can be useful, is you can add marks. So like I could create a new layer and put a little mark here. And that way, if I have to do the transfer multiple times, I can line up each layer. I just export that new layer with any of them that I export, and they'll always be there. I can always line them up. So let's say I just did the outlines, and then I decided, you know what, I really want those details on there to trace. I could print out the detail layer and just line up those dots when I do the image transfer onto it, and then everything would line up. Just for fun here, let's look at the time-lapse replay here. We can see this one takes quite a while. You can see I brought in that reference, drew over it, modified it, brought in that background, drew my own, and there it is. There's the finished product. So that's it. The basic rundown, once again, you take your picture, you import your picture to use as reference. You sketch on a new layer over your picture. You draw your actual lines over your sketch on a new layer over that. You create another new layer for your details. Now you have all of these on separate layers. You can print them separately. You can combine them. You can use them for other things. And there you go. That's a crash course in Procreate for hand engraving. If you have any questions or want to see any other videos, let me know. I'm happy to share. This video did not get into style or technique for drawing scroll work or things like that. I'll put some links in the description below. I highly recommend Sam Alfano's videos at Master Engraver TV for scroll work. He's thorough, he's slow, he takes his time in going through it and gives you constant tips and tricks. So check in the description below for links to stuff like that. Give me a thumbs up on this video. It really helps me out, and I'll see you on the next one.